Chapter 11, laying the foundations for a great state called Canada. The name of this chapter comes from a part of a quote which comes from a speech given by the British Colonial Secretary Lord Carnarvon, who said, "We are laying the foundation of a great state, perhaps one which in a future day may even overshadow this country." It was at the London Conference, where the Dominion of Canada got its Federalist state constitution. For up until 1982, what it basically said at the British North America Act was that if Canada wanted to change its constitution, then the British had to give their consent to do so. In 1982, Queen Victoria's great-great-granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II, signed the repatriated Canadian Constitution. In essence, it was the British North America Act reborn the Canadian Constitution, as the two series of documents are not that much different. The only difference being that Canada no longer has to seek Great Britain's permission if it can change its constitution. So basically, Canada can do as it likes with regard to its constitution. But the men who set sail for London, England, were not thinking about nationalising the Canadian constitution. It was at the Quebec Conference where federalism was the main topic of conversation between the fathers of Confederation. But here, for the London Conference, everybody seemed to have different opinions about what shape Canada should take with regard to federalism. At the back of everyone's minds lurked the same looming question: how to prevent a new dominion from falling apart like the United States did in the Civil War? The answer was federalism. This was where a very strong central or federal government controls everything in the country. To Sir John A. Macdonald, everything meant everything, and he is a proponent of total and complete authority in Canada for the federal government. To Macdonald, the federal government should control almost everything from the military to the fledgling healthcare and education systems, as well as almost every other government department. In fact, according to Macdonald's view, even a dispute between provinces should be remedied by the federal government. So to Macdonald, a provincial government would have about as much control over a province as a municipal government does over a town today. To Macdonald, a strong federal government was a way to demonstrate Canada's independence from the rest of the world. This fitted with his vision for a new confident nation taking its place on the world stage among nations much older than itself. To anyone but Macdonald, a totally powerful federal government seemed to most people at the time to be an autocratic, dictatorial, authoritarian, controlling, oppressive, and even radical in its grand scope of legislation, and also in its political powers. This was all just too much for anybody, even for Georges Cartier, Macdonald's very best and closest, as well as his most trusted confidant and friend. For as Cartier saw it, Confederation was merely a union between two founding peoples, the English Canadians and the French Canadians. Of course, this only included the two European founding peoples. Both Cartier and Macdonald would have been utterly baffled by the notion that native peoples were there first for thousands of years before the Europeans arrived in North America. In any case, according to his version of Confederation, federalism would still prevail, although in Georges Cartier's vision of federalism, the federal and provincial governments would share power between the two levels of the respective governments in Canada. In Cartier's version of federalism, the provinces responsibility between themselves and their respective regions, and the federal government. An example of this would be his plan for taxation, in which the provincial government would look after part of the taxation system, while the federal government took most of the taxation system under its control. However, there was a third version of how a Canadian government should be run. This was put forward by Dr. Charles Tupper, giving the federal government control over things of national importance, including railways, certain taxes and tariffs on trade, as well as national defense, and also to fix the chaotic postal communication system, etc. The key difference in Tupper's plan was to give political power to regional representatives. Tupper was also a man who loved the idea of regionalization in different parts of different parts of political power in Canada. Yet he also thought of how different regions are different from each other. For example, Tupper realized the Maritimes were distinct from Upper and Lower Canada, which, by the same example, were very different from each other. For example, Lower Canada was predominantly Roman Catholic and French-speaking, whereas Upper Canada is predominantly English-speaking and Protestant too. So basically, Tupper's approach to federal and provincial government power was to have three-stage system in the first stage Each provincial government could look after the power of things that only directly affect that one province. For example, if the issue affected Nova Scotia or any other province, then that province was free to deal with it as it saw fit. The next stage of Tupper's plan was that if an issue affected more than one province, but not more than one region of the country, then each province could send delegates to a conference to discuss the issue further. Finally, the third part of Tupper's plan was to have the federal government settle an issue if it affected more than one region, or if there was some kind of deadlock with regard to resolving any issues. With the plan presented by Tupper and Tilley to the other fathers of the Confederation during the London conference, it was basically laughed at. MacDonald could not see the wisdom of Tupper's system, not to mention it clashed with his total federalistic dominated view of the world. Cartier could not see the political reasoning behind Tupper's plan for a regional representation system. In short, Tupper was abandoned in favor of Cartier's system of sharing power between both provincial and federal governments. Tupper's plan to regional representation had one interesting side effect. The first was to make Alexander Galt say more than 3 sentences at once. This meant that Tupper was in severe trouble, as Galt never said more than 3 sentences at one time, and thus some was in severe trouble. Tupper also had made MacDonald speechless for about half an hour, for as Cartier once said, when Sir John A. Macdonald does not speak for half an hour, we are in severe trouble. This was as Sir John A. Macdonald. This was as MacDonald had to talk just about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, drunk and or sober. The one person who took Tupper's idea for regionalism was surprisingly George Brown. Brown was a man who had fought to abolish all aspects of aristocratic privileges in Canada. One of the most interesting things about Brown as a man was that he stood for the fact that he wanted to better himself through his own hard work, not as a result of aristocratic privileges and his connections. To this end, Brown fought to abolish slavery and outdated land laws in Lower Canada. The French Canadians of Lower Canada thought that it was the latest example of how the English were trying to control them. The Americans resented Brown for what they saw as interfering in the national agenda with regard to slavery, particularly in the southern or Confederate states. At home, George Brown alienated pretty much all of the Roman Catholics in British North, as he was an extremely strict Protestant in terms of practicing his religion, particularly when he was younger and a bachelor too. In addition to his being an excessive member of the Orange Order, which had business connections to different important families in Upper Canada as well. The only reason that Brown stood up for Tupper's idea of regionalism was because, like MacDonald, who had once been one of his most bitter political enemies, Brown also wanted federalism. Unlike MacDonald, Brown wanted an appointed upper house, where MacDonald didn't seem to give that much thought to an upper house in Parliament, but Brown thought there should be an appointed Senate, which would be a very good thing as a counterbalance to what he saw as the excessive political power given to the House of Commons under MacDonald's federalism idea. As just like just about everybody else in Canada, he was horrified by the American Civil War that had concluded with the defeat of the Confederate States by the Union States. The main role of the Governor General is to advise, consent, and warn against advice given to the Prime Minister. In Canada, these roles are filled by the Governor General, as they would be by the monarch in Great Britain, although the Governor General still holds regular weekly cabinet meetings with the Prime Minister there is very little actual political power that the Governor General uses in his or her own right on a day-to-day basis. So it's the Prime Minister who gets the blame if something goes wrong. In the British North America Act of 1867, and also in the Canadian Constitution of 1982, it's the Governor General who, at least in theory, is running Canada constitutionally speaking. Anything can't happen without the Governor General saying so. The Governor General is the one who signs acts of Parliament into law, and by the same token can veto them if they think it is necessary, although the Supreme Court now fulfills that role. The Governor General is also responsible for calling a Parliament to order, as the Prime Minister can only go and talk to the Governor General about opening and closing as well as calling an election when Parliament is dissolved. If the Governor General agrees, then Parliament can sit, but only until the Prime Minister asks the Governor General to dissolve Parliament for the end of the session. There is also a trick in this little loophole. This says that for the entire length of an election in Canada, responsible government is temporarily suspended, so the Governor General actually runs Canada on their own with no Prime Minister or until other ministers are elected for the moment an election is called until the new cabinet is sworn in into their new jobs. This means the Governor General will either love or hate elections, as they get to run the country during this entire time. The Governor-General also runs the country when the Prime Minister is visiting another country for a state visit or vice versa. The Governor-General also has the power to throw the Prime Minister out of office if need be. This is exactly what happened twice in Canadian history, to Mackenzie Bowell in 1896, as well as to William Lyon Mackenzie King in 1926. So in short, the Prime Minister may seem to be exercising power over the country, when in actual fact it is the Governor-General who's temporarily giving most of their political powers to the Prime Minister. This is all set down by both responsible government and by the British North America Act of 1867, and also by the Canadian Constitution of 1982. In fact, in both the British North America Act and the Canadian Constitution, the Prime Minister isn't even mentioned at all. The closest mention of the Prime Minister is, quote, the Governor-General and their council shall, which basically means the Prime Minister is a spokesperson for whatever political party is in power in Canada at that time. So the Prime Minister is the first minister amongst various other ministers who make up the Privy Council of Canada, of which the Governor-General is in charge of directing, basically. It is this exact same system for the lieutenant governors of the provinces. The Governor-General also has to appoint the Prime Minister from whatever political party wins an election. So far in Canadian history, we've had 23 Prime Ministers, 14 Conservative and 9 Liberals. The Governor-General is still, in theory, the Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Armed Forces, although today the Governor-General just hands out awards and medals and wears the uniform of the three distinct parts of the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Canadian Army. As well as the different commissioners who are the same as lieutenant governors of the provinces, in the province of Quebec, where that forms the executive party government, so they're called a commissioner. In fact, even today the three Canadian territories in Canada's northern outer fringe, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, still do not have responsible government. They will only get responsible government if and when they become provinces of Canada, not Canadian territories as such. So the commissioners there have about as much power as a premier has in a province. In spite of having three territorial assemblies, the commissioner also has the role of both premier and lieutenant governor combined, so the commissioner is a very powerful person.